Welcome to the Coptimizer Podcast, a platform dedicated to uncuffing your true potential in public safety. We're here to provide you with valuable tips and insights that will help you optimize your life and career. I'm retired Chief Patrick Flanley, and I'm honored to be your guide and coach on this journey. Here, I'll share the latest insights and strategies to help you survive and thrive in the demanding world of public safety. Our noble duty is to protect and serve. We embody the role of peacemakers in our communities. However, this profession's immense physical and mental demands come with a price. If we fail to take a proactive approach for our well-being and lead ourselves first, then the stress from the job can and will lead to poor health outcomes. We have all seen it play out. Not only does this impact our professional and personal lives, but it also affects our ability to fulfill this sacred duty. Like many of you, my journey has been filled with tremendous challenges, with highs and lows. However, through creativity, experience, and a positive attitude, I successfully managed over 30 years in law enforcement, emerging healthy and happy. Now, I am driven to share what I've learned to show you that the path is not all doom and gloom. There is hope and a profound purpose in serving your community, and I'm here to show you that it does not have to come at the cost of your health and well-being. Join us as we explore cutting-edge research, interview top experts, and share inspiring stories of transformation. Whether on duty or off, it's time to optimize your potential and live your best life. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. This is the Coptimizer Podcast. Greetings all. Welcome back to another episode of the Coptimizer Podcast. As usual, I've got a fantastic guest, even though he's from Bloomington and he wears the red and white and he's in this hometown of the Indiana Hoosiers, and they had a great football season and they kicked my Boilermakers ass. I'm still going to call him a great guest. Chief Mike Diekoff from Bloomington PD. Finally got you on the show, Mike. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, it's just, attending all that IU stuff just keeps my schedule really busy. And so.
Well, all I can say is thank God for basketball season.
Yeah, we're not doing so well so far.
Well, I tell you what, you had a great run. You had a great run in football. That's a generational type of run. We haven't done that since 2000 when we had Drew Brees, and hopefully we got new coach coming in. It's the NIL days are changing the landscape, but I digress. People didn't tune in to listen to us complain about football and basketball and interstate rivalries. But a little background: I'm in West Lafayette. I'm a retired chief from Lafayette PD, as most of you know, but that's where the home of the Purdue Boilermakers. Mike is in Bloomington, home of the Indiana Hoosiers. I guess I'm going to have to get Carrie on one of these days up in Notre Dame, and we'll bounce around the state. But today, Mike has a very unique hobby, and what I want to know is if he's the only chief of police in the United States that's also a hot air balloon pilot. Do you know that answer off the top of your head?
I don't think I am. I think there are some chiefs out west that are also balloon pilots.
Yeah, probably from New Mexico, right? That's
yeah,
where they have
I think that's the area. New Mexico or Arizona, somewhere out in there.
All right. So there you have it, folks. There's the teaser. Mike is a hot air balloon pilot. And in case you're wondering, is he a good one or not? That was my question that I had for him before I actually got into a balloon with him. But when this episode airs, I'm going to share a little video that we shot. But this summer, I made the drive down to Bloomington, and Mike was kind enough to take me up with balloons over Bloomington and get a look of, I hate to admit it, the beautiful campus of Indiana University in Bloomington. It's visually it's got a different appeal than the flat cornfields of Tippecanoe County. All right. So before we get into the balloon stuff, you've been chief now for hell, at least probably a dozen years, because you and we served together on the board for the Indiana Association of Chiefs of Police. We've had the opportunity to do a lot of cool things together. And I know you're very active, not just in Bloomington, not just in Indiana with the Indiana Chiefs, but also nationally. So give us a little bit of background, who's about the cop, Mike Diekoff, and then we'll work our way to balloons.
So I am in my, let's see, 37th year, soon to be 38 years as a police officer. I'm in my 18th year, starting my 18th year as chief.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so my entire career has been in Bloomington. Went to Indiana University, got a degree, went through the IU Police Academy. I worked part-time while I was in college at IU, the IU Police Department. Um, as you said, I've been active in the State Chiefs Association for many years. I got active with the International Association of Chiefs of Police for several years. I was on the Police Administration Committee. Now I got off of that late last year, and now I am one of the board members on the midsize agency section of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And so I've been active there, presented several times at different national conferences, IACP, Noble, on hate crimes, on police social workers, things like that. And so, yeah, that's kind of my police career.
Mhm. Well, I want to give a quick shout out to that midsize block because I participated in that as well, and I think it's a pretty active group. But for those that aren't aware, you have your major city chiefs, they have a block, and then you have your midsize block, which, if I remember right, it's what, 100 officers to 500, or maybe 50 officers up
It's
to
50.
500.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so which is nice because they have a separate conference where you can really kind of get down into the weeds and touch on things that are impacting your organization and your agency. And I know so a couple of the things that we've worked on together. One, we both attended the listening sessions at the White House back in 2014-15 timeframe on the 21st Century Policing Initiative. And that I think that was a great project. One of my concerns with that is like we're kind of knuckleheads as cops sometimes. Like we see issues, we see things that we should be doing better. We get a lot of momentum to create change, and then for whatever reason sometimes we just lose that momentum. And I'm not saying it's not because of a lack of effort, but I've been writing recently about wellness initiatives. My concern about the number one killer of cops, cardiovascular disease, the number two killer of cops, suicide, and that all ties into health and wellness, which was the sixth pillar that was identified out of that uh, uh, 21st Century Policing Initiative. And since that document was published, that the health data on cops has gotten worse, not better. Did you know that?
Really.
Yeah. So, all right, that's a little call to action, Chiefs. Let's get a little bit of let's get some investment going in our wellness programs. I'll talk about the Blood Doesn't Lie program later. Insulin resistance in the first responder, but I'm going to rope Mike into being a participant in this with me, even if I have to drag him kicking and screaming. He did not have to drag me kicking and screaming into his hot air balloon, though. We had another chief that he chickened out. He wouldn't come with us. We won't call him out by name, but we'll get him on here and let him explain himself sometime. So,
It is kind of interesting because, there's lots of chiefs that I've offered to take up in a balloon, and so far you're the only one that's taken me up on it. So, and you asked me, I think you asked me, you said, how good a pilot are you? How safe is this? And I think my answer was, well, I've always been able to land. So that's key, you know.
well, you know what? If you were a bad hot air balloon pilot, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, right? Uh, I'm a bit of a risk taker, though, Mike. I mean, I think you probably know that about me by now. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's not, but I'm still here as well. And I took up the hobby of skydiving when I was in college. So, doing free falls from 14,000 feet is,
That would
something
be
that,
that.
yeah, well, that's a lot of fun. And when I asked you if you would let me jump out of your balloon, you told me absolutely not. So I was a little worried you might not actually take me up for fear that I might actually do that, but someday. Um,
Yeah.
so, in terms of social workers in law enforcement, you have been a state leader in that, and I know you've garnered a lot of national attention for what you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit about why you started that program, the success that you've had, and then, kind of what you've learned, and maybe even how that program has evolved, because I know it's grown around the state.
Yeah, well, like many communities, we started to see an increase in like homeless situation, people experiencing homelessness, and substance use incidences were increasing, and so probably, I don't know, it's probably been 12, 15, maybe even 15 years ago by now, we started a program that we call our downtown resource officers. And we took 6 officers and we put them in this program, and they basically only responded to calls involving people who are, might have been experiencing homelessness, substance use issue, mental health issues. And that became a very popular program for us. And those officers um, responded to a lot of the calls, and because we basically funneled those away from the rest of patrol and had that unit basically deal with those calls. And so, what it did was it allowed them to build relationships with these people. It allowed them to connect with social service providers, and basically kind of filled this niche that we lacked. And how do we respond? How do we deal with those types of calls with the intention and the hope of trying to reduce the interactions with law enforcement and reduce those number of calls that we were getting? And so that program ran very successfully for many years. We would cycle officers in and out. At first, it was kind of a hard sell, but I got some people interested in it, and then it became something that people wanted to do. And so then we experienced, employment issues that started a few years ago. We had a pretty, we were 20 officers down. So when we moved people around, that program kind of suffered with not having anybody in it to do those types of those activities, take those calls. So we started looking at what else can we do. And I had been to a couple of different uh, conferences where alternative response to policing, things like that had been discussed. And I started talking to an agency that was out west that had social workers. And so I became kind of interested in that idea and started researching it more, and thought that would be something that would be a good fit with our downtown resource officer program. But again, it would take an area that most law enforcement doesn't have a lot of training and experience in. we would bring in professionals, mental health professionals that knew how to deal with those types of things and were aware of resources. And again, the whole intent was to decrease the number of calls we were getting by being able to provide services to the people that were calling us. And so with the help of our local mental health facility, we kind of put together a plan, and I had gotten information from different departments that had kind of dabbled in this, and we created a position. And so the very first person we hired, we did interviews. We hired a young woman who was a social worker at Indiana University, dealt with sexual assault victims a lot, and so we hired her. And basically, when she started, it was kind of like getting her introduced to everybody at the department, what we do. And then I basically took the stack of information that I had, gave it to her, and said, let's work on creating a police social worker program. And so I frequently talk to agencies that ask how we started ours. And I said, your first hire, your first person you hire is critical to the success of your program, because she basically took the information, put together a plan and a program, and because of the connections she started making with officers, it became really successful really quickly. And all chiefs know that if you don't have buy-in for a plan, that your officers can kill it.
Yeah, implementation is king, right? I mean, ideas are a dime a dozen, and I've had no shortage of ideas over my career, but where I've made my biggest mistakes is probably in the implementation phase.
Yeah.
And yeah, cops are a salty bunch for sure.
Yeah. And so she became friends with officers, and they started to, she would go on calls with them, she would ride with them, she would offer resources. So she built that trust. And so they really started to trust her. And so I credit her all the time with the success of that program, because if we would have had the wrong person in that role, then I don't think that program would have succeeded. And so then we added people. So we currently have 4 social work positions. They're not all. We have 1 opening, but we have 4 positions. They are police department employees. There's different ways you can do those types of programs. You can have partnerships, or you can have embedded social workers. Ours are embedded. They each kind of have their own kind of area of specialty. You talked about wellness stuff. We have presented at IECP's wellness symposiums in the past. And so we have 1 social worker that has a real interest in family type stuff. And so she's really into wellness and how you keep the officers mentally healthy. And we also offer the ability for family members, if they're having some issues and need to talk to somebody, our social workers are available to them as well. So that's an area that I was aware of, but I didn't really pursue it a lot and didn't know how it would work. And they kind of took that area and ran with it, and have actually built it into a pretty nice program where there's a lot of trust between the officers and the social workers. And I know that there are many people who take advantage of the ability to talk to them about, issues they might be going through and things like that. So that was kind of an unexpected bonus with that program. But the social workers taking calls and things like that, it didn't take long for officers to start to call them, refer people to them, refer calls to them. And we don't send them out on their own. They always go out with an officer, or an officer refers something to them for further follow-up. And it's worked out really well. They they go to a lot of meetings. We have a lot of meetings with the service providers in our community to basically just kind of like talk about, calls we have. They do case management, so they have some people that they work with all the time. You know, every department experiences the frequent caller who you just don't know what to do with, but they call because something's going on in their life.
Yeah.
The social workers have taken those people on and those calls on and have actually reduced the number of calls that the department gets, because now they might have a weekly phone call with the person just to kind of keep up with them and see what's going on in their lives. And so it's really benefited. It has reduced the number of calls we have. It's given us more resources for the officers to be able to refer calls to the social workers and deal with whatever problem there might be. It's had a big benefit on wellness stuff within the department. They do, they do an Easter egg hunt. They do a Halloween party every year. So they participate and try to get family activities and things like that, which is good. Again, that builds on that wellness component of the officers feeling appreciated, feeling like, the agency is investing in them and wanting to take care of them and their mental health needs. So that's a big benefit. But it's again, it works very well in our community. We have had numerous agencies from across the country reach out to us about how do you start one of these programs. In fact, it's kind of such a hot topic. We've actually done a couple of conferences on how to set up a social worker program, police social worker program.
So you just host those at your agency or anywhere where people want to bring you in?
We've had three. We hosted one in Bloomington. The next year we hosted one in Indianapolis. And that was basically because of just travel needs. And then we tried to spread it around. There's this loose association of police social workers nationally that meet once a month. And so last year it was held on the East Coast. One of the other social workers for a police agency hosted it. And so we tried. The idea was we move it around so it makes it easier for people to be able to get to that seminar. The first year we did it, I think there were like 25, 26 different states that were represented. The next year we had a few more. So it's definitely, I think, an area that is new and that there's a lot of, I think, promise that it's going to be a successful program and something new in policing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's dig into this a little bit too, because in full transparency for the audience, I've been a skeptic of social workers in law enforcement, and you probably don't remember this, but I do. So, I want to go into some of those concerns because I think most of my concerns have eventually been allayed. I think the answers to the questions that I've had have kind of worked themselves out. So if you go back, right, and think about this, like what you did was, a good example of not letting great be the enemy of good, where you have an idea and you just get started and, not worrying about whether it's perfect right from the beginning when you implement, and quite frankly, not even sure where it's going to evolve or how it will evolve, but you see a need, you see a resource that might be able to fill that gap and to work that need, which is again homelessness, addiction, issues that every community in the U.S. is facing. And for those that are maybe non-law enforcement that are listening to this, at 2:00 in the morning, the call's coming to the police department. It's not going to a social worker. If it goes to a hospital is going to say call the police. And even quite frankly, during the day, if people have a question or a concern about someone who may have overdosed or someone that's acting oddly or strangely or is creating fear, the police are always going to be the ones that get called to respond. So, that's why programs like what NAMI does and others, National Association of Mental Illness, where they train first responders in programs to be able to work with the mentally ill, the addicted, the homeless. It's raising this level of awareness and, quite frankly, about what you can do, how to identify, how to correctly diagnose, so you can get somebody pushed to the right resource. And so this is the key, right? How do you identify what the issue is at the earliest time, get that person into a resource so they don't become a recurring issue? Because cops, like everybody else, can be really good about trying to fix the problem in the moment, but then trying to make themselves available for the next emergency, so they kick the can down the road. They don't solve it, they just kick it down the road. So a temporary solution, which means a repeat calls for service. And a repeat call for service is actually a more inefficient way to operate, because you've got to restart. Every time you've got to restart. That takes time, it takes effort. And for people that don't think that's money, go back and look at your budgets and look at how much it costs to train and equip and staff a police officer in your department. And then look at the number of calls that they're responding to. If you have a high level of repeat calls for your homeless and your addicted populations, you're not running efficiently. So bringing somebody in, and this is ultimately where I got, this is where I have my sticking point, right? Because we had a city employee that did the same job. They weren't under the umbrella of the police department. And I was very intentional about keeping it that way, because I'll be honest, I'll be very candid. Like I was a little concerned about us taking on one more responsibility, because now if we have a police social worker and we have a negative interaction, maybe a use of force or something that happens, this is just one more reason why community members can be critical of the police for not handling it the way that they think they should handle it. When if we had another community organization that was responsible, then we could continue, that we could serve, but we would serve in a collaborative way where we're not the decision maker. We're just there to help facilitate safety of the interaction. So, and so you went a different route, and you took that, you took on that responsibility. So, have my fears been slightly irrational or uncalled for, or have you had to have any of these where a social worker has had like a physical confrontation or use of force where the officers have had to step in? Has that been an issue at all, or is that something we can put to rest?
No, we have not had any of those interactions, but we've had rough patches, because you're right, the politics has gotten involved, and yes, Indiana University is here, but they don't always agree with what we do. And IU had a school of social work, and they started making noises about how it's unethical to do this. And I always countered those responses with, look, we're all trying to help people, and however how we do that can be done differently, but in the end, we're just trying to help people and get them services that they need. And so, but yeah, I had some issues. I had city councils questioning, well, why do you have social workers? They shouldn't be in the police department. And again, I talked about the calls we were going to, how that person being embedded in the police department can get involved right away, and there's not a delay. Because all cops know a lot of times you have to do something right then. And if you give somebody too much time to think about it, it's not going to work. And so having them be able to show up on a call is really beneficial. Never, like I said, never had them, any of our social workers been assaulted. We equip them. They have radios. They have ballistic vests that say police social worker. We give them the tools to make sure that they're safe. Um, but again, we don't send them on calls by themselves. And that's to protect them.
Yeah, and that's interesting because we do know, and I believe it was Seattle specifically, where they had police social workers or their social workers that were they had a couple of them actually murdered. So it's not a an unwarranted risk for a police administrator to think about these types of risk, but I think the most important thing you touch on there is like what works for you is what works for you, and that may not work somewhere else. So,
Exactly.
I you know I'm a big believer in the processes of ComStat, computer statistic, data-driven precision policing. You call it whatever you want. Everyone's got a different name for it, but I'm a firm believer in that. And when I was at the Kennedy School at Harvard years ago, Bob Bain taught this class, and what they teach is really what they worked on with Bill Bratton at NYPD and Jack Maple. And one of the things, if you ever read the Performance Stat Potential, which is a book that I highly recommend for all law enforcement leaders, Bob Bain is very, very specific in saying that these programs of statistical driven or data driven programs are highly individualistic. And what works for one agency may not work for another. It can't, so you have to avoid taking a cookie cutter approach and then trying to slap it onto your agency, and then maybe you get frustrated because it doesn't work for you. So you have to have a high level of adaptability, and I think just the understanding up front that we're going to have to make changes for our local community because every healthcare system is different. Everybody's insurance programs are different, where people can get treatment, where they can't, where you might have to rely on community services versus insurance-based hospital programs. Every one of them is going to be different, but you can look at a quote template and build from there. So yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, and it's been a while since I sat through your presentation, but the another thing that really captured my attention is kind of like the field of dreams, right? If you build it, they will come, right? If you start a program like this, just you just know, people are going to use it, and they may not use it right away, but your first year, I want to say, if I remember correctly, your numbers were like just maybe in a couple of hundred calls for service. And I'm sure a lot of that had to do with just actually your planning and prep and just trying to figure out what exactly you were going to be doing with these employees. But by year three, I want to say it was like 2,400 calls for service. So that's a lot. And of course, everything is just a matter of scale, depending on the size of your community and the resources. And I think what Chief Diekoff and I have in common, at least from a community perspective, is our the makeup of our communities are very similar, in that we have Big Ten universities in our counties, a university police department, and so you have a lot of overlap, and you have a lot of the similarities for needs are are very similar. Both, I think, very active and very busy police departments. So when you're thinking about how you're going to manage all your calls for service, having cops are never going to complain about the ability to hand off a problem to somebody else, especially right? Like how many people are out there like, oh man, I can't believe you called in other resources to take this call, away from me, because I really did want to sit in the emergency room for the next 3 hours. Um, I didn't want to
Yeah.
be out there looking for dope or drunk drivers or something like that. I really wanted to sit in the ER all night.
You bring up an interesting point because you talk about, I mean, especially mental health calls. There's all kinds of debate all the time about should the police be involved in mental health calls, and for a lot of agencies, you're just the default agency that gets the call because they don't have the resources in the community to deal with it. We do, but it's not 24 hours a day. And again, based upon what the call is, we've tried that. We've tried like, okay, we're not going to take it. We're going to divert it to this group. But if there's any violence associated with it, they kick it back to you. So it just sometimes it's more work to try to get somebody else to do it than if you just did it yourself. And so that and again, every so often, there's a new program somebody wants to try, and it's like, one of the things that came about is we never had a 24-hour crisis center, and the community came together, and after about a year of talking about it, one of the major local employers kind of spearheaded this group of business leaders, community leaders, and we got funding, we got grant money, and we opened up a 24-hour crisis center, and it's run by our community mental health center, but it's a place that when it first started only took police referrals. But what happened is we would get people, and they would, and it was basically it was an alternative to arrest type thing. If they committed some kind of minor crime and it really wasn't worth taking them to jail over, you would take them here. And it got to the point though where people would take advantage of it. Well, then there started to be these self referrals, and it got to a point then, it ebbs and flows, because then people we were taking figured out, well, actually it's probably quicker if you just book me into jail, because they're going to kick me out because it's a minor crime anyway, and I'll just get released. And so, but that whole crisis center basically evolved to now it's open for walk-ins. So, and what it suffers from the most is people don't know about it. So this local employer is like, well, we're going to spend the money and do a marketing campaign on it so that people know about it. And again, it takes some of the burden off of the police department, but it's a positive outcome of some of the problems that we were experiencing with people having mental health issues. Was now there's a place at 3 a.m, if that officer has somebody has some kind of emergency mental health crisis that shouldn't go to jail but shouldn't go to the emergency room, can go to this place now. And those people are trained, and they work very well with the police department. They work very well with our social workers. So it's another alternative that we have. It's another option, and the benefit of also though with the social workers is they're connected with the social service agencies, and they're meeting and talking about people and what problems they have. And so when we encounter somebody that might be new, on our radar, we can talk to the social workers and say, hey, are you familiar with this person? And they can check with their contacts in other places. So you kind of are building this continuity of care system, and trying to deal with people that the police are dealing with, and trying to get them out of the criminal justice system so we don't have to deal with them, and get them the services from the mental health providers, so that they aren't our problem.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I probably should have prefaced this, right? Because I will say a percentage of the homeless population is homeless because they really just kind of want to be. But that's a very small percentage. Generally, what you have are people that have undiagnosed mental illness that will self-medicate with either narcotics or alcohol or both. And that leads to, generally non-compliant, community behavior, which means people do stuff illegally. And so whether police officers want to engage in social work or not, it's irrelevant because they're intricately linked. And whether social work wants to deal and hospitals want to deal with the police on the criminal aspect of the downstream actions of these people is irrelevant. And so what communities just have to understand is like, if you don't work together, all you're going to do is make the problem worse. So having these hubs of resources working together is definitely going to save everyone a lot of heartache. And quite frankly, it's going to make your community safer. It's going to get people into the right treatment facilities earlier. And like I mentioned earlier, that saves problems downstream.
Yeah.
So the way I like to tell people to visualize this, and this is just advice that I give to all police leaders, especially like young chiefs, because we all, when we're all young chiefs, right, we're gonna save the world, right? We've got all these great ideas that if people just listen to us, we're gonna fix this shit. And then you realize, like, oh well, I can't do this alone. Like I had all these great ideas, but without without community support or without these other stakeholders or other agencies or organizations, but getting the buy-in, including my own officers. This is not going to go very far. So when you think about a problem, like when you think about homelessness, let's just start there, or addiction. If you think about a wheel, and then you think about the spokes on a wheel, and then you have this axis, if you got to be careful about being the police leader that says, I'm going to be the person who solves this problem. Look at me. I've got my cape on. It says Super Chief on the back. You just bring me your problems and get out of my way and let me fix it. Well, the problem is now is that you're at the center. You've put yourself right where you want to be. And so all responsibility falls on you to solve the problem. That means in finding all the resources. And so what I would tell you is, rather than putting yourself there, take whatever the issue is. If it's homelessness, imagine that wheel, you put homelessness into the axle, visualize that, and now you have all these spokes. And the more spokes you have, the more stability you're going to have in that wheel in solving the problem. And police just happens to be one spoke on that wheel. And then you have hospital, and then you have social workers, and then you have your faith-based programs, and it all branches out from there. It's just, again, take it for what it's worth. I think you're just going to find more success that way. And then again, to Mike's advice, make sure that you get that buy-in, and you build the program to be adaptable and what quote looks right for your community. And that's what, it doesn't matter if what you do doesn't work somewhere else. It only matters if it works where you are. Um, and then don't be afraid to evolve. Just because you've got something that works now, there might be something better. So that's, it's really, I love when I hear things like these kind of like networking groups that just kind of pop up. Like, there's a problem, there's a need, and the end users, the problem solvers that are out there trying to get stuff done, they're the ones that do these great networking, events. So now, what started as something that was pretty probably innocuous and an idea has now grown into, this national movement where people are self-organizing and sharing best practices. And that as long as they continue to iterate there, then success overall. All right. I wasn't planning on having that kind of that long conversation about social work, but see what happens. All right. Now people that want to hear about balloons are like, what the hell, man? Like, why would, like, okay, fast forward to balloons. So, all right. When was the first time you ever jumped in a balloon? Like, how do you even get involved in this? Like,
So growing up, there was a guy. He was a couple of years older than I was, but his parents had a winery here in Bloomington, and so he was 16, and so kind of as an advertising marketing thing, they decided to get a hot air balloon. So the winery had a balloon, and he was their son was the pilot. He was the young at the time. He was the youngest pilot in Indiana flying hot air balloons, and so um, I would I mean, he would fly it from the neighborhood. So I would periodically go and help crew and just kind of really got interested in it. And so just through over the years, never really did anything with it. And then finally I started thinking, you know what, I should get my pilot's license. So I started talking to my wife, and she was, I think, hesitant at first. But I finally convinced her. I met this guy. She had been at an event and bought a gift certificate for me for a balloon ride. Okay, and I had gotten my first balloon ride with the guy in the neighborhood, and and so I met another guy in Bloomington that was a balloon pilot, but he was making balloons. So um, I was going to use the gift certificate, and he was going to give me a ride, and I never actually did get that ride with him because every time we were going to go, the weather didn't cooperate or something. And so, but this guy is like, hey, I'm going to move to Albuquerque, and I'm going to make balloons in Albuquerque. And he goes, if you are serious about wanting to get your pilot's license, I will sell you one of my used balloons and you can learn to fly in it. But if you can come to Albuquerque for like 2 weeks, I'll teach you how to fly. So I convinced my wife to let me do this. And so I bought the balloon. The guy rebuilt it because most of the balloon, the heat at the top, that's where it wears out the fastest. So he rebuilt the top of the balloon, put a brand new top in it. And then I go to Albuquerque. He's living out there. I fly out there, and I didn't have to take my balloon because he had balloons. And so he starts teaching me how to fly. And so that first year I went, I was out there. I think it was like 10 days, and did a bunch of flying. I soloed. I came back here. We probably have, I don't know, 6 or 7 pilots in Bloomington, balloon pilots. So I come back here. I start flying with some of the other local pilots. Didn't fly a lot, and then the next year, I still am friends with this guy. The next year, I go back to Albuquerque and do more flight training. Come back, fly here, and then that fall, I take my flight test and my all the testing I needed to do to get my private pilot's license. So I do that. I get my private pilot's license. So, I'm flying my balloon, taking friends, and it's really, people are like, this is really kind of a neat hobby you have. And so then the guy that taught me to fly moves back to Bloomington. And so then he had a manufacturing business in Albuquerque, opens a satellite office in Bloomington, and he's making hot air balloons here. And so, but he has a ride business that he starts too. And he's like, so when he would go out flying rides, I would go out and fly my balloon just for fun. So he's like, I need help. You need to get your commercial license. So when you have a commercial hot air balloon pilot's license, you can fly passengers that pay. Okay. So I worked on that, and I got my license, and then I start flying rides for him. So when you fly in a ride business, your hours build up, and pilot, it's all based on flight hours for your license. So I'm flying for him, and I'm flying, I think the one year we flew 100, I had over 100 hours, which is a lot in a balloon. And so then I fly for him for a couple of years. Well, then he ends up, he got sick and ended up passing away. And so I ended up getting the ride business. I bought it off of his family. So now I have this hot air balloon ride business. And then me and a couple of other guys got the manufacturing business. So we kind of have this whole balloon thing now going on in Bloomington, where we have a manufacturing business, we have the ride business, and we have a certified repair station. So the nice thing is, if I damage my balloon, we can fix it and get it back in service pretty quickly. But I currently have 8 balloons, flying hundreds of people a year on rides. And yeah, so.
Okay, I'm going to describe this process, folks, if you've never been in a hot air balloon, because I had not, right? I have Again, I've jumped out of airplanes, but I had never left the ground in a balloon. And yeah, but before I get into that, I just can't help but I'm inside, I'm chuckling because I'm thinking, all right, he's a chief of police now. He starts fantasizing about just hopping in a hot air balloon and floating up into the sky and floating away. Like there might be some there, maybe I can take on role of counselor and think like, what is, I think maybe there's some avoidance or a psychological process going on here. Kind of like my old fantasy where I used to think about a long and windy gravel road on the shady side of a mountain with like a small little cabin. Like someday when I retire, that's I'm going to go be a hermit that lives in the woods. So I can see the appeal of a balloon, and yeah, in all seriousness, like from just obviously Mike knows I'm big into the wellness space. The whole cop optimizer theme of Coptimizer is you know something that's really important, regardless of what your role in the organization is having outlets and having something, a hobby, something that you can do that completely detaches you and removes you from your day-to-day responsibilities. For me, it was always like I was in competitions and fitness stuff, so CrossFit competitions, Spartan racing, stuff like that, things where just the training process, thinking about that was to me, it was like people always looked at it, man, that's another additional responsibility you have. And no, this is a passion, it's a hobby. It just happens to be good for me and makes me better in my job, but and it's very useful, but it was also a very clear and distinct psychological separation. Like when you're in the middle of a real shitty workout or something that's really hard, the last thing you're thinking about is, the problem that's waiting for you at your desk at work. So um, that's something cool. Like but the idea of being in a balloon, right? You can't fly distracted. You got to focus on what you're doing. And uh, so I drove down to Bloomington. We got the balloon. We drive to the launch area right by the airport, and you can take these things pretty much anywhere and fill them up with hot air and launch them. And that was kind of a cool process. I don't know all the technical terms, but I'm really good at blowing hot air, but I can't blow enough hot air to fill up a balloon. But the just like when that thing, like you get in that bucket and you kind of feel it start to
It's a
leave the.
basket. It's not a
Oh yeah,
bucket. Basket.
whatever. It's a bucket. It's about we're in the bucket. See, there's a technical term. Um, but again, I'll share the video on the YouTube channel and on and a link for others that can watch it. But that was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced was just that sound. And it reminded me of a kid. Like what kid doesn't remember seeing these hot air balloons fly over? Like we used to chase them on our bicycles, right? And ride around like following the big Remax balloon up here. When that Remax was the one that I just remember. I know there was a few others, but great branding, by the way. You should build
I
one
have
for
one of
your.
those.
You should build one that says Bloomington Police Department on it. Do some community outreach in that thing. Uh, but it is kind of cool. Like you get up there in the air and it's very quiet. It's very peaceful. And it reminded me a lot of skydiving in the sense that, in skydiving, the first 30 seconds are pretty violent because you're jumping out of an aircraft that's moving fast. You've got the wind blowing through your ears and if you're wearing a helmet and when you're at terminal velocity and you're falling through the sky, it's very noisy. It's not quiet at all. But then when your parachute opens and suddenly everything gets real quiet and all you hear is that little fluttering from your canopy. And when you're at 5,000 6,000 feet, depending on when you open, right, like you have a lot of time to just float amongst the clouds. It's very peaceful. um, but it is amazing like what you can hear coming up from the ground as well. And that was cracking me up in that balloon. Like people, like when it's bizarre, but when you're up there in the air, when people on the ground talk, like you can hear conversations that people are having. And Yeah, that was
Yeah.
awesome.
So yeah, what I really enjoy is it is very quiet. It is very peaceful because you're just floating along with the breeze. And so, you fly over neighborhoods and you have kids come out yelling up at you and they'll follow you. And it's not uncommon. We'll have when we land, we have people say, yeah, we started following you up, a mile or so away. And you hear, you fly over areas, you can hear cows mooing, you can hear dogs barking. Um, so it's just I find it peaceful. Um, and it can be stressful too. I mean, I've not had a lot of those situations, but you're at the mercy of the wind and the weather, and the wind can change. And so you can fly over people that don't like balloons, and they'll yell up at you, and um, you know, um, and so
Anyone ever taken any shots at you?
I've had people threaten it, but they've never done it.
All right, maybe
It is a
maybe you need to
federal
put
offense.
some, yeah, put some body armor on the, old vest on the bottom of your quote basket. Sorry, not bucket.
It is a federal offense to fire at an aircraft. So, because it is an FAA certified aircraft. So anyway, but yeah, it's flying. I find kind of peace in that. And then um, what I like about having the ride business is I get to share that with other people, because a high percentage of the people that I take up, they've never been up in a balloon. And so it's a first experience. And I have some people that are like afraid of heights. So they're trying to like maybe conquer that fear a little bit. Um, I've never had anybody that say, I have to get out of this right now, land. Most people, if they're afraid of heights, I talk them through things and try to kind of keep them focused on me and not looking down. Um, and so it's, legally, I like to fly, in the 500 to 1,000 foot above the ground range, but legally we can go up to just under 18,000 feet, which that's like jet aircraft heights, which I'm not
That's freaking
comfortable doing.
nuts.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable doing that. Um, but um,
Uh,
but again, it's you fly over like forested area, farm fields. So it's just kind of a peaceful experience.
well, so if you're in the Midwest, and I should have worked this out with Mike before we did this interview, like some kind of commission, sales commission for cop. Tell Mike you're interested in getting a flight and enter code Coptimizer on the website. But I just encourage you to go do it because, yeah, it was again. I'm not. I don't. For being someone that used to skydive, I again, and my SWAT days, rappelling off sides of buildings, this climbing out, climbing off the top of a roof at 6, 7 stories in the air, or whatever. That doesn't bother me, like, but I'm not like standing and looking over the edge of something I never like if I'm not like hooked into a harness or have a parachute on my back. But I will tell you, like, I never like if you do have like a little bit of nervousness about being up high, I don't think there's anything to be too concerned about. It's very stable in the basket. I didn't feel like this was, like the basket wasn't swinging back and forth. Like, yeah, there's no concern about falling out. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't be too nervous about that. And at the elevation that we were flying, I thought that was perfect. It wouldn't have bothered me to go up to like maybe 3, 4,000 feet, but any higher than that, I'd be like, damn, I want a parachute. Like, I want a backup, in case this thing. Uh, but
The
and again, the safety, if you look at the numbers, uh, the safety of balloon flights is, they're very safe. They're very, very low risk. You
the
know,
safest form of aviation.
yeah, nothing in life is risk free, folks. If you want to have a little bit of enjoyment. Now, I will say this: my wife was like, "No effing way." She's like, "I'm not going up." So she's with our chief friend. Uh, What she did say that she would love to do is like if we go to the winery where you've it launched from, she's like, I'll be at the winery and I'll watch you go and I'll enjoy some wine and then you can come back and join me after the flight. So
Kind of the fun thing is the guy that gave me my very first ride when I was in high school um, flies for me still. He's still an active pilot, and he will fly rides for me when I need additional pilots. So that's kind of a neat, just kind of full circle type thing. So
well, and it's seasonal. It's not a full-time gig. You know, a lot of people might be wondering, like, how does, when you're a chief, how do you have time for this? And that's why I wanted to point out, like, hobbies like this, sure, you can convert them in, they can be a business, but they're actually a very integral part of a successful personal wellness plan. I mean, when you're doing something that you're passionate about, that you enjoy, and you can de-stress from it and separate yourself. So I think it's definitely the most unique hobby to date yet that I've seen. So pretty cool. Now I will say this, right? Once you're up, getting up in the air, pretty cool. What's you have these gigantic propane tanks. Is it propane or is it like, and
yeah,
then what's the unit called that actually the igniter that
burner.
okay, so you have the burner. Generally, what like so the like in skydiving, like a 300 square foot canopy is considered a pretty big canopy, and you can carry a decent amount of weight on that, and
Yeah,
it's gonna change like uh, your ground speed,
right.
so having like I assume it's the same with balloons. So the more square footage you have, the more, the greater the load that you're going to carry. So
Yeah. So I have 8 balloons, and they're different sizes. My biggest balloon is 180,000 cubic feet, and so that has a basket that will carry 6 to 8 people. And then I have um, 5 balloons that are 120,000 cubic feet, and I'll carry 4 people and a pilot um, in those balloons. And then I have one that is 105,000 cubic feet that I'll use for, if I have 2 or 3 passengers. And then I have one that is, let me see, I have one that is 90,000, and that's like a 2 passenger and a pilot balloon. And so, you mentioned Remax. I have some corporate balloons from some local businesses, and so it's I fly them in the ride business. They get the advertising, and so it is based upon weight and lift. And so the bigger the balloon, the more weight that it can lift. And so that's dependent upon how many passengers, what the weight is of all the passengers, the temperature, that all has an impact on the lift of the balloon. So that's how I decide which one to fly.
well, and Bloomington is it's such beautiful country down there in Monroe County, Brown County. I mean, it's world renowned for Hoosier National Forest. So in the fall, I imagine it's amazing to fly over, and that's when I was down there and we did it. Um, the so you get up in the air, what goes up must come down, and obviously the first rule is we don't want to come down too fast. We want to come down at the right speed. But here's where I was really really impressed, because like you don't necessarily have a choice as to like where the winds are going to take you. The winds are going to blow the where they're going to blow, but like you were able to read the winds at different elevations and anticipate based on your experience as a pilot, like kind of which way it was going to take you. And so there was a few times that we were starting to land and the wind kind of took us in a way that wasn't going to work and we're below treetop level, and then we would just kind of go up and that, yeah, of right up over the tops of the treetops. And then we're coming up on this neighborhood, and you're like, I'm going to put it down right there. I'm like, yeah, that ain't happening. Like in my mind, I'm thinking we're landing, we're going to be on somebody's roof, smashing in the side of a house. But I'll be damned. Like you just kind of very skillfully, you know, I don't know what you call it, like feathered it, it just kind of like like we landed right in this small, quiet neighborhood right on the street. People are out, it was right at dinner time. People have been barbecuing to come out. And then the first person that comes out, it's like, hey, Mike, how's it going? Like, what is this, like a popular landing spot for? uh, so that was pretty intense, but that was kind of the most exciting part of the flight, I think, was like, how's he gonna put this damn thing back down on the ground? That was fun.
Yeah, we landed right in the street, didn't we?
Yeah,
That
right in the
neighborhood. Yeah.
street. I got pictures. I'll share them. I'll show, if anyone thinks that we're BSing here, I'll show the video. That was pretty cool. I don't want to scare people away because like one of the questions I have is like what's the hairiest situation you've been in up in a balloon? Like, did you ever think you were gonna die? Like, people ask you cop questions like, how many people have you shot?
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
I've been pretty fortunate. I've not really had any situations where um, I was overly concerned about safety. Everything's based off of the wind and the weather. And so, but you also when you're preparing for a flight, you check the weather a lot and you look at the different forecasts and things like that. And so you pretty much most the time kind of what it's going to be like. And then if it's iffy, you just don't fly because you can always fly another day, but why risk it and get hurt or something like that. And so most of the time it's when we choose a takeoff location, a launch location, that's all based on the wind direction, the speed, and future landing spots. People always are like, "Where are we going to land?" And I'm like, "Don't know yet," And so, um,
so you
because
have a chase vehicle that follows you.
yes,
For
so
people that are wondering, like, well, how do you get back? It's like, well, call an Uber and come
there
get your
are there are
balloon.
some that I know of some pilots that will fly without a chase vehicle. What they will, they're usually in smaller balloons, but they'll strap a bike or something on the side of it. They'll land, they'll pack it all up, and they'll bike back to get their vehicle to come pick it up. Um, but for instance, where we landed, if we didn't come down at the right time and we were still high, and I thought we weren't going to make it, we would have just flown on to find another site. So that's the advantage you have with a balloon is if the saying always is don't pass up a great landing site because you may not find a better one. Um, and so I subscribe to that theory, but there have been times where I thought I was going to land and I didn't because I couldn't, the wind changed or something. And so we had to fly on. And,
What's the longest flight you've ever been in, like planned or
um,
unplanned?
probably about an hour and a half. So I have about 2 hours, a little over 2 hours worth of fuel usually on board. And we try to fly for, an hour because you always want to make sure you have reserves in case you can't get into a landing spot. But the longest flight I had was probably an hour and a half. And it was one of those, okay, I'm going to land here. Nope, can't make it. Okay, I'm going to land here. Nope, can't make it. So you just keep going. So,
Well, and so I guess that's probably why, thinking of this as doing it out west and like it just makes sense out in Arizona and New Mexico because out there you just have miles and miles of, just vast empty spaces where plenty of landing where, in the Midwest, still pretty similar, right? A lot of cornfields,
yeah,
a lot of open area, but and when you're in that metropolitan area, it like
there
you,
there have been pilots that I've known that Arizona, New Mexico that come here and fly, and they sometimes freak out. They're like, "How do you fly here? There's so many trees and fields you can't land in, and where do you land?" I've had seasoned pilots say, "If you can fly in Bloomington in Indiana, you can fly anywhere." Because you just can't land anywhere. Like I won't unless it's an emergency. I won't land in the summer in a field with crops. That's just being respectful. If it's emergency, then that's different. But I won't land in fields that have livestock, because it scares them. So, but again, if it's an emergency, yes. So, but out west, like when I did a lot of my training in New Mexico, it's just desert. So you can fly and just basically land anywhere in the desert. So,
Yeah, then you just have to worry about rattlesnakes.
It can be a tough environment to fly here. So,
well, that's so. And thinking about New Mexico, so they have this event out there every year. I can't remember the name of it. You probably know it right off the top of your head, but where all the balloons
yeah.
from what do you call yourself? Are you a ballooner, a ballooneers? What is it?
Balloonist.
Balloonist.
Yes.
So balloonists from around the world come to Santa Fe. I think is it Santa Fe
It's
or
Albuquerque.
Albuquerque?
Yeah.
And that's a pretty cool site because some of those balloons are just, I mean, very artistic, very beautiful. It's kind of a cool thing to see. I might have to go out there one of these days.
Yeah.
What's the name of that festival?
It's the Balloon Fiesta, and it's every year and for 10 days in early October. And you're right, they'll get 500-600 balloons from all over the world that will come there and fly. And it's I've not flown in that event, but they have another one around Valentine's Day that has, I don't know, 150 balloons. And I have flown in that a couple of times. But Albuquerque is from a geographically, it's a really good place to fly balloons because it's kind of in a bowl. And so it's the only place I know of that you could take off and land in the same spot, because you can take off, go a certain elevation, and the wind will take you one way. You go up, and then it brings you back, and it's called box winds. And you literally just fly a circle and just come back and land where you took off.
Oh, that's cool.
And I've experienced that. I wasn't the pilot; I was with the guy that taught me how to fly. But that's why it's so popular to fly out there. And so it's just wide open. So it's just a good location to do that.
All right, so this is a little bit different than like that Darwin Award winner, that guy out in LA that strapped on those like weather balloons onto his lawn chair, filled him up with helium. Remember that guy that like wound up launching himself like up into like 20,000 feet into
Yeah.
Well, theory of natural selection. That's why they call it a Darwin Award. Okay, what question haven't I asked about balloon riding from a balloonist that I should have asked? Is there anything I missed?
I think you've pretty much covered it all. I mean, for those who are like, well, how do we know about your training? I have an FAA pilot's license. I have a commercial pilot's license. And so I've had to pass, written tests and flight tests to get my license. I have to do medical exams every year. I have to pass, there are proficiency things that I have to be have so many takeoffs and landings in a 90-day period. So there's continuing things that I have to do as a pilot to keep my license. And so a lot of people are like, well, like, so how do we know, like you said, how do we know you're a good pilot? I have
You're still here.
I have over 400 hours of flying, which, people are like, well, that doesn't sound like a lot. But if you consider most balloon flights are an hour or less. And again, it's your pilots who fly regularly, they hone their skills. If you only fly a couple times a year, you get rusty. It's like anything. And so I'm flying a lot from May to November. I don't fly much in the winter, but um, during the late spring, summer, fall, I, I'm flying two, three, four times a week in the evenings, and so um, you just build on your experience. So
All right, very cool. So, if anyone's listening and they're curious, or they want to come take a ride, like how do they get in touch with you?
I have a website. It's balloonsoverbloomington.com. You can get on that, and you can get there's lots of pictures. You can look at them. You can book rides through the website. So that's the best way.
And so if you're a business and you're thinking about like, hey, this would be a cool way to do some advertising. I'd love to like get our brand. Not only are you a pilot, but you actually make these balloons and you showed me that facility, which was pretty cool. Like, and again, it's always nice, like it, when you, when somebody knows how these are, how their a balloon is constructed, how it's made, and they've actually done it, then it's just going to give them kind of next level understanding of what flight is like, also what's required, and so that's pretty cool. So would it be the same website people
Yeah,
go
you
to,
you
or
could you could I could yeah, if you use that one, I can get you to the manufacturing side of but it's a different name, but it's if you go through that first one, then you can email me and I can
that because
get
that's kind of cool too.
yeah.
And then the the last thing I wanted to mention too was you showed me a picture of a balloon that had lights on it that was used for like, so like people that have weddings and stuff like that. Like, so is it possible like to anchor to the ground, and if somebody just wants to go up like 100 feet and then come right back down, not having to worry about going anywhere,
Yeah.
maybe
So
someone that wants to take a baby step, is that something that they
yeah,
can
so
do?
we do tether rides all the time. People will hire us for events. Last year we did a couple of weddings. We did a couple of like church social things. And we go to a site and we set the balloon up and we go up and down. It's tied to the ground, and it's a great introduction to ballooning for people who are like, I'm not sure I want to do this. And we'll go up, 50, 75 feet, stay up there for a couple minutes and then come back down. So, but yeah, we do those all the time too.
All right, I'm thinking about National Night Out. I might have to uh, tell my my police chief, like, hey, here's a great idea for National Night Out. We can, of course, I don't
I've
know if you
I've
want to
not
send a
done
little.
that yet for ours. I've had people say you should bring a balloon, but um, usually we have Lifeline fly a helicopter in, so it would kind of conflict. So
Yeah, yeah, tether flay. Okay. Um, balloon. All right. Yeah. All right. I'm formulating some ideas. I'll work on the marketing for you later.
okay,
All right. Well, I knew this was going to happen. We were going to try to keep this around 60 minutes, and I can't stop from gabbing sometimes. This balloon thing, though, so curious. It was really cool, and I know I thanked you that night, but just publicly, I really appreciated the opportunity to get down there and take that ride. It met all of my expectations. The cool factor was, off the chart. It was one of the more unique things that I think I've ever done. Um, Not, I will say, not quite as of adrenaline rush as when you jump out of a plane, but but a different type of adrenaline rush. Still very cool. And I know cops can be they can be adrenaline junkies, so there's always the draw there. If you're thinking about it, or if you're on the fence about safety, whatever, I wouldn't be too concerned. Um, I like to poke fun at Mike because he's an IU Hoosier and I'm a Boilermaker, but I never felt in danger for 1 second on the flight, never felt nervous. His ground crew was really cool and it was a lot of fun. So hit up Balloons over Bloomington. And then it's if for those that are interested in maybe learning more about like if you're ever going to have another conference on the police social worker, the social worker program, where what's who would you
Yeah,
direct
just
them to at your agency to reach out to?
they can reach out to me. They can send a generic email to the department, and we can get it to the right people to let them know what's going on with those. With
What's your email address that you would want them to
the,
send it to?
if you send it to police@bloomington.in.gov, um, that they'll get those to me.
Police, POLICE at bloomington.in.gov.
Yes.
That'll get you to Bloomington PD. Just um, say, hey, we're interested in learning more about the social work program. All right. Well, all right. Well, last thing I always touch on, what's something you got going on right now that's interesting? Maybe what's a good book that you've read lately? Are you reading a book, or something that you've done or interested in doing that you want to share before, that before we cash out
There,
here?
there's a book I was reading. I'm in the process of reading about the Civil War, um, but I'm drawing a blank on the title because it's been a couple weeks since I picked it up because of the holidays and traveling around. So
When
uh,
was the first balloon used in warfare? That's what I want to know.
there were balloons that were used in the Civil War. They were helium hydrogen type balloons that were used for spying. They would put them up behind the lines, and kind of monitor um, what was going on in the area. So, but
Huh.
they were helium and hydrogen type balloons, not hot air. So,
So if I shot a flaming arrow into your balloon, it would blow up and you would drop out of the sky.
not modern day including, no.
I know the like
No.
back then,
But
right?
back
Like
then, it maybe.
I've seen the Hindenburg. I saw what happened there.
So, but I mean,
Uh,
the other thing to remember, ballooning's been around since 1783 when the Montgolfier brothers blew the first balloon in Paris. So it's been around for a long time.
wow, who knew? Now I know. See, it's the second thing I've learned today. All right, well, it's more than a second. That's it, folks. We're gonna wrap it up. Appreciate you spending some of your valuable time with us for this episode of the Coptimizer Podcast. We're now in season 3, which is hard to believe, but it's been a lot of fun. Conversations like this, come on, who would have ever thought I'd go on a hot air balloon ride to have a conversation on the podcast. So if anyone out there has the next adventure for me or something they think I need to give a shot at trying, let me know. Maybe we have it's been a long time since I've jumped out of an airplane. My wife told me once we had kids, like, no go. So like you can't do that. So now that my youngest is almost out of high school, um, maybe it's time to go jump out of airplanes again and give that a shot. Um, we'll see. But until the next episode, Mike, I appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for the invite. So
Right on. We'll be 1042.